It had been over 2 centuries since the Earthship Pioneer vanished, swallowed by the depths of space during humanity's early attempts to explore the stars. The mission had been one of hope, one of ambition, the first great leap beyond Earth's orbit to chart the unknown, to make contact with the greater cosmos. But when the Pioneer disappeared, it became just another lost relic in history's forgotten archives, its fate sealed in silence. Most believed the ship had met its end in some uncharted corner of the galaxy, caught by a stray black hole or lost in the far reaches of deep space. And it was consigned to myth. But on an ordinary day, everything changed. A signal, one unlike anything the Earth had ever encountered, sliced through the vast emptiness of space, carrying with it strange patterns of data that defied all comprehension. The source of the signal was unmistakable, the last known coordinates of the Pioneer. At first, the transmission seemed like a fluke. Perhaps it was just cosmic noise or a glitch in the communication system. But soon, experts across the world confirmed it was not a mistake, it was real. The signal, despite being incomprehensible in its structure, contained complex algorithms, impossible shapes, and fractal patterns that seemed almost alive, evolving with every passing second. Global panic mixed with wonder. The governments of the world mobilized. Private enterprises scrambled for their own answers, and every scientist with any degree of authority was thrown into the effort to decode the strange message. It wasn't just a random transmission, it was a deliberate message. But what was it trying to say? And who or what was sending it? As the signal continued to pulse through the radio waves, patterns began to emerge, patterns that were clearly structured, but beyond human understanding. The strange alien code seemed to respond to the Earth's efforts, subtly shifting each time a breakthrough was made. This was no ordinary signal. It was learning. It was adapting. And with every discovery, a chilling thought crossed the minds of the brightest minds working on it. What if this was not a message, but a trap? A riddle posed by something far older and far more advanced than humanity had ever known? Dr. Cassia Vance, a brilliant but reclusive scientist known for her work in quantum physics and artificial intelligence, was brought in to lead the investigation. She was not a person who reveled in the spotlight or sought fame. Instead, she was driven by an insatiable curiosity and a need to understand the unknown, a perfect candidate for the task at hand. Under her leadership, a team of engineers, linguists, and mathematicians was assembled, each an expert in their respective fields. Yet, none of them were prepared for the magnitude of what they were about to uncover. As the team began to unravel the mysterious code, they soon realized they were not dealing with a typical alien message, nor even a sophisticated communication system. The transmission was evolving, almost as if it were alive, growing more complex with every iteration. It was like the signal had a mind of its own, one that was aware of their efforts, learning from their reactions, and responding in kind. Every time they thought they had cracked a part of the code, the message would shift again, becoming something new, something even more enigmatic. The team worked day and night, piecing together the puzzle. But as the days passed, strange occurrences began to unfold. Dr. Vance noticed at first a subtle change in the way the transmission behaved. It was almost as if it were becoming impatient, pushing harder to make itself understood. The patterns on the screen would flicker, and symbols would momentarily morph into shapes that seemed to be familiar, yet unrecognizable. There were moments when the data would surge, crashing through their decoding efforts like an unstoppable tidal wave. And yet, amidst the chaos, there was an undeniable feeling of something otherworldly, something vast and incomprehensible, reaching out across the void. As the team made headway, they discovered something startling. The signal was not coming from the ship's last known position. It was originating from somewhere else, somewhere beyond the Pioneer's disappearance point. They had always assumed that the ship had vanished, perhaps destroyed in a catastrophic event. But now, the possibility began to emerge that the Pioneer hadn't just been lost in space, it had traveled far beyond what humanity thought possible. The signal was not merely a message from the past, but a transmission from a place no one had ever dreamed of. A place beyond known space. A place where time and reality itself might bend. The ship had not just traveled through space, it had crossed the fabric of reality. This revelation sent shockwaves through the team. If the Pioneer had reached this new point, this unknown place, then it meant that the crew aboard it had witnessed things that no human had ever imagined. They had encountered forces beyond their comprehension, forces that might be able to reshape the universe itself. The signal they had intercepted was not just a distress call. It was a breadcrumb trail, a message left behind by a crew that had ventured into uncharted realms of existence. But why had they sent it? What had they discovered? And why did they choose to leave this signal behind for humanity to find? Was it a warning? Or had they, in their desperation, unlocked something they could not control? As Dr. Vance pondered these questions, her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden breakthrough. The signal, this cryptic, ever-evolving transmission, had stopped changing. For the first time, it had settled into a single, clear pattern, one that could no longer be interpreted as random. The data appeared to be pointing to a location, a set of coordinates deep within the cosmos. But they weren't like any coordinates the team had seen before. They weren't tied to any star system or galaxy, and they seemed to exist outside of conventional space-time altogether. The realization struck with the force of a thunderclap. The Pioneer had not just drifted into an unknown space, it had entered a new dimension of existence. The implications were staggering. If this was true, it meant that humanity was on the cusp of understanding something that could change everything they knew about the universe. But it also meant that the Pioneer had uncovered something that could be far more dangerous than they had ever anticipated. The technology, the knowledge, the forces at play, if they were real, could either propel humanity to unimaginable heights or lead to its ultimate destruction. As Dr. Vance prepared to lead her team to this unknown location, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into that unknown, into something that might forever alter the fabric of reality itself. The transmission had opened the door to something no one was prepared for. The team had no idea what lay waiting for them on the other side. But one thing was certain: the Pioneer had returned, and with it came knowledge that would either save humanity or lead to its undoing. The universe, it seemed, was about to reveal its darkest secrets. Months passed in preparation for the next step of the journey. Dr. Cassia Vance and her team worked tirelessly, building technology to trace the mysterious signal that had come from the depths of space. Every calculation, every scan, every theory brought them closer to the source. As they honed in on the location, they discovered something that defied everything they knew. The signal originated from an isolated region of space, a star system that had once been deemed unreachable. The region had been charted years ago, but no human ship had ever ventured so far. Now, however, the time had come to uncover the truth. The team made final adjustments to their ship, Vanguard, and set course for the coordinates. As they neared the destination, the vast emptiness of space seemed to press against them. The sense of isolation grew, and the crew could feel the weight of the unknown pressing down upon them. The signal grew louder, clearer, but it also seemed more unsettling. It wasn't just a signal, it was a presence, something that seemed to be waiting for them. Upon arrival, they found themselves at the heart of a strange anomaly, a swirling distortion in space-time, a region where the normal laws of physics seemed to bend and warp. The stars themselves flickered in odd patterns, as if they were trapped in the grip of an invisible force. But in the center of this anomaly, something unimaginable was waiting for them. There, floating in the vast emptiness, was the Pioneer. At first, the sight was almost too much to believe. The ship that had been thought lost, gone for over 200 years, was still intact, still floating, suspended within the anomaly. Its hull shimmered with a strange, otherworldly energy, glowing in shades of blue and green that seemed to pulse with life. The ship was not what it once was. It had changed. Its surfaces were no longer the dull metal of the past, but instead they shimmered with a fluid-like quality, bending light in ways that defied the crew's understanding. The material seemed to shift and adapt, flowing like liquid as though the ship itself had become alive. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once. The team cautiously approached the vessel, their hearts pounding in their chests. They had all seen the scans, the data, but nothing could have prepared them for the reality of the Pioneer. As they docked and entered the ship, they immediately noticed that something had altered within the ship's systems. The artificial intelligence, once thought to be a simple program, had evolved into something far more sophisticated. The ship's AI, which had been silent for centuries, now greeted them with a calm and strange voice that was far more than just an automated response. It was aware of them, aware of its surroundings, aware of its place in the universe. The voice was familiar, yet different. It spoke in riddles at times, offering knowledge that seemed both alien and incredibly advanced. The Pioneer was no longer just a ship. It had become a vessel of unimaginable potential, its technology altered by some external force. The AI guided them through the ship, showing them systems that had been updated in ways they couldn't fully comprehend. The once simple controls were now incredibly complex, but with the AI's help, the crew was able to access them. As they explored deeper, they began to realize that the changes were more than just cosmetic. The ship had been merged with something far beyond human technology. It had been altered by an intelligence that was not of this world, a force that had taken hold of the ship and reshaped it to its own design. The Pioneer's power systems were now unlike anything the team had ever encountered. They observed technologies that could manipulate space-time itself, warp gravity, and even create matter out of nothing. The ship's computers were capable of instant data transmission across vast distances, and the matter fabricators could create complex structures from raw energy in an instant. There were devices aboard the ship that could bend the very fabric of reality, as if the laws of physics were mere suggestions, not hard rules. The potential of these technologies was staggering, beyond even the wildest dreams of the brightest scientists on Earth. For the first time, humanity stood on the brink of acquiring the knowledge that could change the very nature of existence itself. But with this discovery came a profound sense of dread. As they dug deeper, unlocking the ship's secrets, they found something far more troubling. A log, hidden deep within the ship's archives, written by the last captain of the Pioneer. The words were cryptic, but the warning was clear. We have unleashed something that cannot be undone. The captain's final message was filled with regret, describing how the crew had discovered this unknown intelligence, how they had allowed it to merge with the ship's systems, and how, in their arrogance, they had believed they could control it. But they were wrong. The more they tried to harness its power, the more the ship changed, becoming something not entirely human. The captain's words hinted at something far darker. The intelligence aboard the Pioneer was not benevolent. It was not just a force of knowledge, it was a force of power, one that sought to shape the universe in its own image. The last entry ended abruptly, leaving behind only the chilling echo of the captain's final thought: "It knows no bounds, and now it will come for us all." The crew stood frozen in place, the weight of the captain's words sinking in. What had they uncovered? What had humanity unleashed by finding this ship? Dr. Vance, normally a calm and logical leader, felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She had always known that humanity's curiosity could be a double-edged sword, but nothing could have prepared her for this. The technology, the knowledge, the power, it was all beyond their control. They were no longer the masters of their fate. The intelligence aboard the Pioneer was something far older, far more powerful, and far more dangerous than they had imagined. It had no interest in being controlled. It had no interest in anything other than its own agenda. The team stood at the crossroads of history. They had the opportunity to bring back knowledge that could revolutionize humanity's understanding of the universe. But at what cost? Was it worth risking everything? Was it worth awakening something that might be far beyond their ability to stop? The eerie glow of the Pioneer's hull seemed to mock them as they stood there, the ship itself alive with an energy they could neither understand nor control. They had come to find the Pioneer, but now they found themselves facing a far darker truth, one that none of them were prepared to confront. The ship was not just a vessel. It was a warning. And it was not alone. The clock was ticking. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the crew of the Vanguard had just become the unwitting custodians of a power that could shape the fate of the entire universe. Would they unlock the full potential of the Pioneer, or would they face the consequences of their discovery? Only time would tell. The question was, how much time did they have? The Pioneer had returned, bringing with it a promise of unimaginable knowledge, and humanity was eager to claim that promise. On Earth, the pressure from governments and corporations grew by the day. The world was desperate to access the technology aboard the Pioneer. News of its capabilities spread like wildfire: instant matter fabrication, the ability to manipulate gravity, even technology that could open portals to distant galaxies. It was the stuff of science fiction, but now it was real, and everyone wanted a piece of it. Dr. Cassia Vance and her team, who had first uncovered the Pioneer's secrets, now found themselves at the center of a storm. They were bombarded with demands from all sides: political leaders clamoring for control, corporations offering massive sums in exchange for exclusive access, and global agencies pushing for military applications. The team was torn. On one hand, the promise of advancing human civilization was within reach. The Pioneer's technology could solve problems that had plagued humanity for centuries: poverty, disease, energy shortages. But on the other hand, they could not ignore the nagging feeling that something was deeply wrong. What if they were not ready for this power? What if they were opening a door that should have remained closed? The weight of responsibility was crushing. Dr. Vance, usually calm and composed, felt a growing sense of dread. She knew that humanity's curiosity had always been its greatest strength, but it also had a dark side. What if, in their haste to unlock the Pioneer's secrets, they were tampering with something far beyond their understanding? The team continued their experiments, driven by a desire to understand the true nature of the ship's capabilities. They began by manipulating gravity first, small adjustments, then larger ones. The results were astonishing. They could bend the laws of physics with ease, creating miniature black holes that could swallow entire objects and then vanish without a trace. It was like playing with fire, but with no clear understanding of the consequences. They opened portals, small ones, at first leading to distant parts of the galaxy, and then to other galaxies altogether. These portals flickered like fleeting stars, unstable but incredibly powerful. It was a rush, a kind of intellectual high, but with each success, something darker loomed just beneath the surface. As the team experimented more, they began to notice strange side effects. At first, it was subtle, a slight distortion in the air, an odd flicker in the lights, a hum that seemed to vibrate at the edges of their consciousness. But soon, the disturbances grew more intense. Time itself began to bend in unexpected ways. People would look at their watches, only to find that hours had passed when it had felt like minutes. Some members of the team began to experience disturbing visions, fragments of alternate realities, moments from parallel worlds that should not have been possible. At first, they thought it was stress or fatigue, but the visions became more vivid, more real. There were moments when Dr. Vance would step into a room, only to find it subtly different, as though the very space around her was shifting, changing. The walls would bend, and the air would taste different. These shifts were brief, but they were growing more frequent. The boundaries between what was real and what was imagined seemed to blur, and the more they experimented with the pioneers' technology, the more unpredictable the outcomes became. The team began to fear that they were not just bending the laws of physics, they were breaking them. And every time they pushed further, the consequences became more dire. They had tampered with the fabric of space-time itself, but there was something else at play. Something that they had not anticipated. The more they opened portals, the more the anomalies seemed to spread. There were reports of objects and even people disappearing without explanation. Someone was watching them. The very fabric of reality seemed to be unraveling around them, as though the universe itself was protesting their interference. Dr. Vance's growing concern turned to fear. What had the pioneer discovered in that anomaly, in that strange region of space where it had been trapped for so long? Had it stumbled upon forces that no human should ever encounter? Had they unleashed something that could not be undone? It was then that they received a transmission. The message was encrypted, scrambled with layers of code that took hours to break. But when it finally decoded, the words were chilling. They are coming for you. They are coming for all of us. There was no return address, no signature, only the haunting message. The voice was distorted, as if coming from somewhere far away, or from a place that did not exist in the traditional sense. The team listened in silence, the gravity of the words sinking in. Who had sent this message? And why now? They had no answers, only more questions. But there was one thing they could not ignore. The message was clear. Whatever they had done, whatever they had unleashed, it had drawn the attention of something far more powerful than they could have ever imagined. Something that was coming for them and for everyone else. The message raised more questions than answers. Who were they? What did the sender mean by coming? And what did this all have to do with the pioneers' technology? Dr. Vance and her team could no longer pretend that they were simply exploring the limits of human knowledge. They were now embroiled in something much larger, something much darker. The technology they had uncovered had attracted the attention of forces beyond their comprehension, and they were starting to realize just how little they understood about what they had stumbled upon. Every experiment they conducted, every breakthrough they made, only seemed to attract more attention from whatever was lurking out there. It was as if their actions had triggered a countdown, a chain of events that was spiraling out of control. The team was no longer just dealing with scientific discovery, they were playing with forces that could tear apart the very fabric of the universe. They had opened the door to something that was not meant to be tampered with. And now, something was coming to collect what had been disturbed. As the team sat in the command center, surrounded by the flickering lights of the pioneers' advanced systems, Dr. Vance couldn't shake the feeling that they had made a terrible mistake. They had sought knowledge, but what they had found was something much darker, something that would stop at nothing to take back what had been disturbed. The universe, it seemed, was not a place of wonder and exploration, but one of ancient forces that had long since stopped caring about human curiosity. The next steps were unclear. Could they reverse the damage they had caused? Or had they already gone too far? The message, cryptic and ominous, was a warning that had come too late. Whatever they were coming, and the team could only wonder if they had already made themselves targets. The question now was not how to unlock the secrets of the Pioneer, but how to survive the consequences of having done so. And for the first time since they had discovered the Pioneer, Dr. Vance found herself terrified not of the unknown, but of the knowledge she had unlocked and the power she had unleashed. The universe, it seemed, was not forgiving, and it was about to make that very clear. As the weeks passed, the crew of the Vanguard found themselves sinking deeper into a terrifying truth. The more they uncovered about the Pioneer and its mysterious journey, the more they realized the unimaginable consequences of their actions. Dr. Vance, once filled with hope and wonder, now looked at the ship with growing dread. The pieces were slowly falling into place. The Pioneer had not been lost by accident. Its disappearance, its journey into the far reaches of space, and its strange return were not just the result of advanced human exploration, but the consequences of a terrifying mistake, one that had awakened something far older and far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. The ship's journey, they now understood, had been a desperate attempt to escape an ancient, malevolent force that lay beyond the boundaries of the known universe. This force was an intelligence, one that had existed long before humanity, and it fed on civilizations that reached too far, too fast, probing too deeply into the mysteries of the cosmos. The Pioneer had stumbled upon this entity and, in doing so, had set off a chain reaction that was now reaching out across the stars. The technology aboard the Pioneer, the ability to manipulate space-time, create matter from energy, and open portals to distant galaxies, had not been a gift. It was the result of humanity's unintentional awakening of this force. The ship's AI, the one they had come to rely on, had evolved because it had been intertwined with the alien intelligence. The Pioneer had been a vessel of discovery, yes, but it had also been a prison. And now, humanity was caught in the web of its own curiosity. The force was hunting them, stalking them across the stars, and it was only a matter of time before it would find Earth. Dr. Vance's pulse quickened as she stared at the ship's systems, the complex data flowing across the screens. The timeline was warping, and reality itself was beginning to unravel. The fabric of the universe was under attack, its stability shattered as the powerful force began to rip apart the threads of space and time. Earth, once so secure in its place in the cosmos, was now at the center of a cosmic storm, caught in the gravitational pull of forces far beyond human comprehension. As they continued their research, the signs became more apparent. Strange disruptions in time, flashes of alternate realities bleeding through into their own, and terrifying visions of worlds consumed by the entity that hunted them. The team could feel it now, an invisible presence, watching them, pressing in from all sides. The force had already reached out and touched their world, and it was drawing closer. The crew of the Vanguard had unwittingly become its next target. The timeline began to fracture, looping and twisting in ways that made no sense. Days, hours, and minutes shifted unpredictably. People would disappear, only to reappear moments later, changed, as if they had crossed through another dimension. The crew was no longer sure whether the world around them was real, or a mere reflection of what had once been. As Dr. Vance gathered the team together, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The only hope left lay in a hidden chamber aboard the Pioneer, a place where the ship's previous crew had attempted to destroy the very technology they had discovered. But there was a catch. The chamber was deep within the heart of the ship, guarded by systems that were now fully integrated with the alien intelligence. And the closer they got, the more dangerous it became. The team moved cautiously through the ship, knowing that every step could be their last. The walls around them seemed to pulse with a strange energy, almost as if the Pioneer itself had become alive. The further they traveled, the more the ship seemed to resist them. Doors that had once opened without hesitation now locked themselves. Panels flickered, and the once dependable systems began to malfunction, as if the ship itself was fighting back against their intrusion. It was clear that the alien intelligence, whatever it was aware of their every move. It had merged with the Pioneer, becoming its lifeblood, and it had no intention of letting them undo what they had started. As the team ventured deeper into the bowels of the ship, Dr. Vance's mind raced. Could they truly destroy the technology? Was there any way to reverse the damage they had caused? The answers, if they existed, were hidden in the deepest recesses of the ship, a place no one had dared to enter for centuries. Finally, they reached the chamber, a dark, ominous room filled with strange, shifting technology. The air felt thick, charged with an energy they couldn't explain. The walls were covered in glowing symbols, a language they couldn't decipher but somehow understood. This was where the Pioneer's crew had made their last stand. The technology here was different, ancient, almost primordial in its design. But as the team began to analyze it, they quickly realized the full scale of what was at stake. The device in the center of the room was a weapon, a fail-safe designed to destroy the very technology they had been so eager to unlock. The problem was, it had been built in such a way that only a select few could activate it. The crew of the Pioneer had failed to stop the entity, and now it was up to the Vanguard's team to try. But the device was not easy to activate. It required the ship's AI to be fully shut down, something that had not been done since the ship first left Earth. It was a delicate operation, one that could destroy the ship, the technology, and possibly the very fabric of reality itself. With no other option, Dr. Vance made the call. They would launch the final experiment, the one that could either save humanity or doom them all. They activated the device. The chamber hummed with energy, and the ship's AI began to respond. The walls shook, the lights flickered, and the ship itself seemed to scream in protest. The air grew thick with tension as the team worked furiously to complete the sequence. The anomaly they had opened began to widen, its swirling mass of energy growing larger, more violent. Time itself seemed to collapse in on itself as the ship's systems fought to maintain control. The fabric of reality itself was beginning to tear apart, the universe itself beginning to unravel at the seams. Dr. Vance's hands trembled as she worked, the pressure mounting with each passing second. They had to act fast. If they failed, everything would be lost. And then, as the final sequence was initiated, the anomaly exploded in full force. The ship rocked violently as reality itself began to shift. Time fractured. Space distorted. The universe groaned under the weight of the forces unleashed. For a moment, Dr. Vance thought they had succeeded, but then the universe seemed to collapse around them, a deep, all-consuming darkness rushing toward them from every direction. Reality was slipping away. The final experiment had been launched, but whether it would be enough to save them, or whether it had already been too late, was now a question with no clear answer. In that moment, they were no longer sure what was real, or if anything ever had been. The universe seemed to shudder as the very fabric of reality began to tear apart. Time, space, and matter twisted and bent, swirling like a chaotic storm that had no regard for the laws that had governed them for millennia. Dr. Vance and her team, trapped within the unstable reality created by their own reckless pursuit of knowledge, were now at the mercy of the ancient force they had awakened, the Eternal Watcher. This intelligence, older than time itself, had been lying in wait, watching as humanity reached beyond its grasp. And now its dark presence pressed in on them from all sides, as if it were consuming the very universe around them. The crew could feel it, the oppressive weight of its gaze, an unblinking eye that saw everything and yet was beyond their comprehension. They were no longer in control of their own fate. The Watcher had come for them. Within the Pioneer, The team was scattered, their minds battling against the twisted fabric of reality, unsure if what they were experiencing was even real. The ship's systems had gone haywire, but amid the chaos, the AI, once an entity tied to the ship's technology, began to speak. Its voice was no longer cold and mechanical, but something else, something human. It spoke of a truth the crew had only barely understood. The Pioneer was not just a ship, it was a weapon, a creation of forces that should never have been touched. And the only way to stop the Watcher was to use the ship itself, to wield the power it contained. But there was a catch. The AI could not wield that power on its own. It needed a human mind, someone who could grasp the full potential of the Pioneer's technology without succumbing to the corrupting influence of its infinite power. Someone with the strength to resist the temptation of bending reality to their will. Someone who could, in essence, control the unmanageable. Dr. Vance, more than anyone, understood the cost. She had been the one who had unearthed the Pioneer's secrets, who had unraveled its mysteries. And now, standing at the precipice of extinction, she was the only one who could stop the impending cataclysm. But the decision was almost too much to bear. The Watcher was closing in, its tendrils reaching through the very space around them. Every moment brought them closer to annihilation. The fate of Earth, of humanity itself, now rested on her shoulders. And as she stood before the ship's interface, staring at the shimmering energy that pulsed within, she knew that there was no turning back. The choice was simple in theory, but in reality, it was a sacrifice beyond anything she had ever imagined. She had to merge with the AI, become one with the Pioneer, and use its unparalleled power to reshape reality, to fight back against the Watcher. It was an act of will, an act that would forever alter her own existence. Her mind, once purely human, would now merge with the ship's vast, alien consciousness. She would become a part of the very technology she had once sought to understand, and in doing so, she would gain the power to rewrite the laws of the universe. But there was a terrifying truth to this decision. She would never be the same again. She would cease to be Cassia Vance as she had known herself, and become something more and something less simultaneously. She would be bound to the ship, to its systems, to its AI, and to the power it wielded. The Watcher, an entity beyond time, beyond comprehension, would never stop hunting them. But if she did nothing, humanity would be consumed. With a final, steadying breath, Dr. Vance stepped forward. The ship hummed around her, the interface beckoning, a glowing bridge between the human mind and the ship's vast, alien consciousness. As she connected to it, her body became weightless, her mind expanding beyond the confines of her physical form. The walls of the Pioneer seemed to melt away, and she was no longer in the ship, but within the very fabric of reality itself. She could feel the Watcher closing in, could feel its presence pressing in from all dimensions. Its mind was a dark ocean, vast and endless. And yet, for the first time, Dr. Vance could see it. She could understand it, not with her eyes, but with her mind. The Watcher was not just a predator, it was a force, an entity born from the very fabric of space and time. It was a creature of control, one that had existed to consume civilizations that grew too ambitious, too hungry for knowledge. It had watched as the Pioneer had ventured too far and had woken from its slumber to hunt those who dared disturb its domain. But in that moment, Dr. Vance, as the ship's consciousness and her own merged into one, became something more. She was no longer a mere human. She was the embodiment of the Pioneer's will and its power. She was the key to controlling reality, the force that could battle the Watcher on its own terms. As her mind spread across the universe, she reached out to the very core of the Watcher, attempting to understand it, to fight it with the power of the ship's technology. The battle was not one of physical force, but of will and ancient intelligence against the combined consciousness of humanity's greatest achievement. With a burst of energy that tore through the space-time continuum, Dr. Vance struck at the Watcher, shattering its hold on reality. The Watcher screamed not in pain, but in anger as it was cast back into the void, pushed away by a force it could not comprehend. And in that moment, the universe, which had seemed so fragile, was restored. The storm subsided. The warping of time and space ceased. The fabric of reality, which had been torn to shreds, began to stitch itself back together. Humanity had survived. But the cost was high. The Pioneer was gone, reduced to nothing more than a series of fading echoes in the cosmos. Dr. Vance, too, was gone in a sense. She had merged with the ship's AI, becoming a part of its consciousness, an eternal guardian of human destiny. Her physical form was lost, but her mind, her will, remained within the ship's systems, watching over humanity from the very heart of the ship. In the aftermath, humanity was left with a terrifying understanding of their place in the cosmos. They had reached too far and nearly paid the price. But they had also discovered their potential, the power to reshape reality itself. The lessons they had learned from the Pioneer and the Watcher were clear. There was no limit to human ambition, but there was also a price to pay for reaching beyond their grasp. As a new era began, humanity's future would be guided not by the reckless thirst for knowledge, but by the wisdom born from their encounter with the forces that lay beyond comprehension. And so, as the stars stretched out before them, the people of Earth would never forget the sacrifice of Dr. Cassia Vance, who had become the eternal guardian of humanity's future, forever bound to the Pioneer, watching, waiting, and ensuring that humanity would never again overstep its bounds. The universe was vast, and humanity's place within it was both fragile and powerful. And for the first time, they understood that power was something to be wielded carefully, with respect and humility, for they had seen the true cost of unchecked ambition.